Good morning. I've been away for a while, and we're going to kind of continue back from the lesson what we spoke about last week. So this lesson is going to be on the forbidden fruit, and there's a big misconception of what the forbidden fruit is. The forbidden fruit is not an apple. I think the apple gets a bad rap because an apple is good fruit. As a matter of fact, it's one of the healthiest fruits you can eat. So what we're going to do today is really break down and talk about what the scripture was talking about when it is referring to the forbidden fruit. Now we know in Genesis, there was a choice that man had. There were two trees in the Garden of Eden. One tree, he said, there were several trees that man had the ability to eat of. But he said, I give you a command. He said, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you may not eat, because the day that you eat that, you shall surely die. And what was very interesting about these trees is these trees were in the midst of the garden. And when something's in the midst of the garden, that means that you have to go and look for it. It's not obvious. And it's the same thing with salvation. It's the same thing for sin. We look for salvation and we look for sin. So now let's talk about what the forbidden fruit is. So we know in the story that there was a conversation with Eve and the serpent. And the serpent beguiled Eve to eat of the forbidden fruit. And she took the forbidden fruit and she gave it also to Adam. And the day when they took the forbidden fruit, they died spiritually. So that's what the scripture was saying, and the command that God gave them. He said, the day when you eat of that, you will surely die. And they did surely die that day, because they died spiritually and they brought on the physical death also. Because before Adam and Eve took the forbidden fruit, they had a glorified body. And a glorified body was one that was eternal. It would never die. So that's why God was telling Adam and Eve that the day you eat of this forbidden fruit that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, that you shall die. And here's why. Because Adam and Eve did not have, Adam and Eve was not ready for knowledge, because knowledge is gained through experience. And they were inexperienced. So what God was saying, evil is something that you may desire, but you're not experienced, and it will destroy you. So let's pretty much identify what the forbidden fruit was. And now James pretty much tells us what the forbidden fruit is, because it follows the same succession of what happened in man. So let's go back and say, what was that? So the day that man ate the forbidden fruit, man died. Man was enticed, right? Man was enticed by Satan to eat the forbidden fruit. Now, let's go and see how James identifies and let you know what the forbidden fruit is, so we won't give this apple a bad name anymore. And then when people say the forbidden fruit, they won't say he ate the apple. He didn't eat the apple. So let's talk about what Eve and Adam ate when they took on the forbidden fruit. And James says this. We're going to go in James. It's going to be chapter 1. We're going to read starting at verse 13. It says, let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted of evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire or lust is conceived, it brings forth sin, and sin, when it is grown, it brings forth death. That was the exact succession of what happened with man. It first started out with an entanglement with the devil. Eve entangled with Satan. And when you entangle with someone and they're evil, it's an enticement. So through the enticement, Eve lusted for evil. And the reason why Eve lusted for evil, because Eve already knew good, because God made man in his image, in his likeness. So if God was good and you were made and we were made in man's image, in God's image and likeness, then we already have the gene of good inside of us. We don't have the gene of evil inside of us. I mean, the man did not before man sinned. That evil had to be imputed in man. And the devil's strategy was, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to corrupt man just like I became corrupted. So what caused Satan to be corrupted? His lust and his desire, his lust for power, his lust to be worshiped, his lust to be on the same level as God. And God said, I am not going to share my glory. So when we go to fruits, now, again, they said fruit. So we know now that the forbidden fruit was lust. It was not this apple, like some people will tell you. It was the lust or desire to know evil. And the lust or desire comes from the main fruit, and the main fruit was the transgression. Because in order for you to sin first, see, the devil thought that the devil was responsible for making us sin. No, no, no. The devil is just a catalyst in the sin. The first sin is when we break the command of God, because God gave Adam and Eve the command to say, do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So that was the command. So in order for them to be enticed and do what the devil said, they had to go and break the commandment with God first. So when we sin, we're sinning against God. It's not the other person. You're sinning against God. Now let's talk about fruits in the scripture so we can really see what fruits are. Now, in order for us to go and talk about fruits, we're going to talk about the fruit that God wanted man to eat. Because he said, of all the trees in the garden, you may freely eat, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, I don't want you to eat that, because the day you eat that, you're going to die spiritually. Now, let's talk about the fruit that he was talking about, that we are supposed to eat. Now, this is coming from Galatians chapter 5, and we're going to start at verse 22. And the scripture says, but the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit. So he's saying this apple, which people get wrong and said that man ate the apple, man did not eat the apple, because God made the apple and everything God made is good. So don't give the apple a bad rap. Man took on lust, which led to sin. Now, here's what God told man to go, and he said, be fruitful and multiply. So what was he telling him to be fruitful and multiply? These are the fruits that I want man to eat. And James was the brother of Jesus, and here's what he's telling us what he wants us to eat. This is good fruit. The fruit of the Spirit. God saying, I need you to eat the fruit that is my spirit, because I am spirit. I need you to eat me. And he's saying, I am. Here's whose God is. Here's his fruit. His fruit is love, is joy, is peace, is long suffering, is kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such there is no law. Now, and they say, and those who are Christ have crucified the flesh with its passion and desires. Because he's saying, I want you to eat this because I want you to crucify yourself with the passions in your desires. And the scripture says this, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. Right? That is the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is putting on Christ. So like I said again, let's not give the apple a bad name, because that's what man took on. The fruit of the Spirit was lust, and lust leads to death. Thank you, and we'll talk about another part of this lesson, next Sunday. Have a wonderful day.